She stood near the counter with tired eyes, her hands holding an empty bag that looked as though it had been used many times before. Her work shift was over, and while most people around her were busy laughing, eating, and enjoying their meals, she seemed to hesitate. She did not want to disturb anyone. She did not want to seem desperate. Yet hunger had its way of breaking even the strongest silence. After a long pause, she finally spoke in a soft, almost shaky voice. She asked if it would be possible to take some extra food that might be left over. Her words were not loud, and they were spoken with care, as if she feared being judged. The young staff at the counter gave her a quick look. They did not think much of it. Leftover food was not a big deal. Some shrugged, some smiled politely, and they handed her a small bag filled with what was left. She took it with both hands, almost too grateful for something so simple. To her, it was not just leftovers. It was dinner for her loved ones. She lowered her head, whispered a thank you, and turned to leave. At one of the nearby tables, a man who had been quietly observing raised his eyes from his meal. He had noticed her hesitation, the way she asked, and the look in her eyes when she received the bag. It wasn't greed. It wasn't laziness. It was something else, something deeper. This man was not just another customer. He was the CEO of the company that owned several businesses in the area. He was used to people asking him for contracts, meetings, or favors. But he had never seen someone ask for food in such a humble way. Something about her request stayed in his mind, even as he tried to return to his own meal. He watched her walk out slowly, clutching the bag as if it was worth far more than anyone there realized. People in the diner went back to their laughter, their busy conversations, their glowing phones. To them, it was an ordinary evening. But to him, something felt unusual. Why would she ask for leftovers? Why not order a meal? She had been working there, so perhaps she couldn't afford more. Or maybe it was not even for her. His thoughts circled, and with each passing moment, his curiosity grew stronger. He leaned back in his seat, unable to shake off the feeling that there was more to this story. He had built his life on instincts, on noticing details others ignored. And in that moment, his instincts told him this was not just a simple request. He felt a strange pull, a mix of concern and wonder. For a moment, he debated with himself. Should he ignore it and go back to his comfortable life? Or should he follow the quiet voice inside him that said, "There's something you need to see"? Outside, she walked quickly, as if every second mattered. Her steps were small but steady, and she carried the bag close to her chest, protecting it from the evening breeze. She didn't look around, didn't stop, and didn't act like someone who had just been handed free food. Instead, she looked like someone on a mission. The CEO from the glass window could still see her silhouette crossing the street. Something inside him pushed him to rise from his seat. He placed a few bills on the table, left his half-finished meal behind, and stepped outside. The air was cool, and the street was quieter compared to the lively diner. He spotted her a short distance away, walking down a side road instead of the main one. She moved quickly, not like someone heading to relax after a long day, but like someone who had a reason to rush. He kept a respectful distance, not wanting her to notice him. His heart beat faster than he expected. He wasn't sure what he was doing, only that he couldn't let the moment pass. As he followed, his mind filled with questions. Was she taking the food to children waiting at home? Was she supporting someone sick? Or was there some darker reason? The uncertainty pulled him in deeper. Each step she took made him more curious. She didn't once look back, didn't stop at a shop, and didn't greet anyone on the road. She seemed invisible to the world, moving with a purpose that others would never guess. She turned into a narrow street with old buildings that looked worn out. Paint peeled off the walls, and windows were cracked or covered with cloth. The air smelled faintly of dust and dampness. It wasn't the kind of place one would expect a worker to live, not unless life had dealt her a heavy hand. He slowed down, making sure to stay hidden. She disappeared into one of the smaller buildings at the very end. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the door she had entered. His chest rose and fell as questions pressed harder against his mind. He didn't yet know what waited inside. He didn't know who she lived with or why that simple bag of leftovers seemed so important. But he knew one thing clearly: this was no ordinary story. He had seen wealth, success, and luxury in his life. Yet in that single moment, a woman holding a bag of food stirred more questions in his heart than all the meetings and deals he had ever made. He stepped closer to the building, his mind whispering that he was about to discover something that could change the way he saw the world forever. The night air carried a chill as he stood near the entrance of the narrow street. The door she had entered was small and old, its paint cracked from years of wear. For a while, he remained still, uncertain about what he was doing. It wasn't normal for a man of his position to follow someone home. He had sat through board meetings with world leaders, signed contracts worth millions, and spoken on stages to thousands of people. Yet here he was, standing in a quiet, broken street, following a woman whose name he didn't even know. Something about her had pulled him in. The way she asked for leftover food had not been loud, desperate, or demanding. It was soft, filled with humility, almost like a whisper. And when she held the bag close to her chest, there was a kind of urgency in her movement, as if what she carried was priceless. He could not stop himself. He slowly walked closer to the building, careful not to make a sound. The windows were dimly lit, and through one small gap in the curtain, he could see a faint glow inside. He leaned to the side, trying to get a glimpse without being seen. His curiosity grew stronger, his mind racing with questions. Inside, he saw her placing the bag of food on a worn-out table. But what he saw next froze him in place. Small hands reached out eagerly. Two little children, their faces thin but full of light, hurried to the table. They looked at the bag as if it were a treasure chest filled with gold. The woman carefully unwrapped the food, dividing it into small portions so everyone could have something. There was no rush, no greed, only gratitude in their eyes. He felt something stir deep inside his chest. She wasn't feeding herself first. She wasn't hiding the food. She was feeding the children. And then, from the other side of the room, an elderly figure appeared, frail, moving slowly, with a slight bend in the back. The old woman gave a tired smile as she joined them, her eyes soft and warm as she looked at the food on the table. The CEO's throat tightened. This wasn't just about hunger. This was survival. The woman had asked for leftovers not because she wanted more, but because she had people waiting for her at home, people who depended on her. He stepped back, his heart heavy, realizing the truth was far different than anything he had imagined. He leaned against the wall outside, taking a slow breath. The street was quiet except for a distant barking dog and the faint laughter of children from another home. Yet his mind was filled with the image of those two little kids, and the elderly woman smiling at a bag of cold food as if it were a grand dinner. He remembered his own childhood, though he rarely let those memories come back. He too had known what it was like to go to bed hungry. He too had watched his mother struggle to put food on the table. Life had changed for him, but those early struggles had shaped the man he became. And now, watching this family, he felt that same ache inside, the ache of helplessness, the weight of unfairness. Still, he didn't move. Part of him felt he shouldn't be there, like he was intruding on something sacred. Yet another part of him knew that walking away would mean ignoring a truth that had found him for a reason. He stayed, silently observing, trying to piece together the story of the woman and her family. After a while, he noticed how carefully she served the children, making sure they ate first. She encouraged them with a smile, pretending it was a feast, pretending there was more than enough. The children laughed, enjoying their meal as though it was the best food in the world. The old woman closed her eyes and whispered something that sounded like a prayer of thanks. The CEO's chest tightened again. He wondered how many times this had happened before, how many nights the woman had carried leftovers home, how many nights she had gone without eating so that her family could. The thought unsettled him. He had more than enough in his life, more money than he could ever spend. And yet here was a woman holding everything together with almost nothing. He shifted his weight and looked down at his shoes. The streetlight above flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. His conscience began to speak louder than his doubts. Maybe he wasn't here just out of curiosity. Maybe fate had placed him in that diner at the same time she asked for food. Maybe there was something he was meant to do. Minutes passed, and still he didn't leave. He couldn't. Each small detail inside the home kept pulling him deeper. The way she tucked the children's hair behind their ears. The way she encouraged the older one to share with the younger. The way she gave up her own portion without hesitation. She moved with love, not complaint. Strength, not weakness. He realized then that he wasn't just watching a woman with a bag of food. He was watching a story of sacrifice, a story of love, a story that deserved to be told. His mind began to settle on one decision. He couldn't just walk away. He needed to understand more. He needed to talk to her, to ask why she had never reached out for help, and to know how she kept going with so little. His footsteps echoed softly on the ground as he took a step closer to the door. The night around him felt heavy with silence. But inside his chest his heart beat louder, preparing for what came next. The wooden door creaked softly as he moved a little closer, careful not to draw attention. From the dim window he could still see the woman and her family gathered around the small table. The room was quiet except for the soft voices of the children. Their laughter rose in short bursts as they took small bites, their little hands clutching the food like it was the best thing they had ever tasted. The woman's face was tired, her eyes carrying shadows from long days of work. But there was pride in her every movement. She smiled at the children as though she had just laid out a feast, not scraps of leftover food. She encouraged them with gentle words, telling them to eat slowly, to enjoy every bite. Her voice was warm and her hands moved carefully, breaking pieces into smaller parts to make sure both children had equal shares. The CEO felt his throat tighten as he watched. He had seen wealth displayed in grand halls, meals wasted at large parties, and people who had more than they could ever use. Yet here was a family treating leftovers as if they were treasures. He had never seen gratitude so pure. The old woman sat nearby, her back slightly curved, her hands trembling as she lifted her portion. She didn't eat right away. Instead, she placed her hand over the younger child's head and whispered a few words, a quiet blessing, before finally taking a small bite herself. She smiled faintly, as if the food was enough to fill her heart, even if it couldn't fully fill her stomach. The CEO's chest ached. He remembered his own childhood again, moments he often locked away. Nights when his mother would give up her meal, pushing her plate toward him, saying she wasn't hungry even though her stomach had been empty for hours. Back then, he hadn't understood. Now watching this woman, he saw the same story repeating, the same sacrifice, the same strength, the same love. He leaned against the wall outside, his eyes fixed on the flickering light inside. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Why hadn't she asked for help? Why had she chosen to quietly carry this burden alone? He could see it clearly now. Her life was not built on pity or begging. It was built on dignity, pride, and an endless willingness to put others before herself. The younger child giggled, crumbs falling from the corner of his mouth. The woman gently wiped his face with the edge of her sleeve, her smile never fading. Then she looked down at her own plate. She had barely taken any food for herself. Most of it had gone to the children and the old woman. The CEO noticed that she pretended to eat, moving the food around, taking the smallest of bites. She was hungry, he could see it in her eyes, But her hunger was less important than theirs. The room inside was quiet, but to him, it was filled with unspoken words. He saw strength where others might see weakness. He saw resilience where others might see struggle. He saw love in its purest form. And suddenly, he felt small. He had power, influence, wealth, yet compared to her, his achievements seemed shallow. She was living proof of something money couldn't buy: selfless love. He stepped back from the window, his eyes stinging. He hadn't expected this. He had thought maybe she was taking food to resell, or that she might be hiding some secret. Instead, the truth was more powerful than any guess he had made. She wasn't keeping the food for herself. She was giving everything she had to the people she loved. The CEO pressed a hand to his chest, taking a deep breath. His world, so full of success and riches, suddenly felt hollow. Here, in this dimly lit room, he saw a kind of richness that no amount of money could ever buy. He looked up at the sky, the stars faint above the city lights. Questions circled in his mind. How long had she been living like this? How many days had she worked hard only to come home with almost nothing? How many times had she swallowed her own hunger so that her family could smile? The answers didn't matter. What mattered was the truth he had now seen with his own eyes. This woman was carrying the weight of her world silently, with no one to applaud her, no one to notice except for him. A stranger who had followed her home. The children's laughter echoed faintly through the night air, reaching him where he stood. It wasn't just laughter. It was survival wrapped in joy. It was proof that even in the hardest moments, love could still create happiness. He took a step back, his mind heavy but clear. He knew he couldn't simply walk away now. This wasn't just a chance encounter. He felt as if fate had brought him here, showing him a truth he had long forgotten. And in his heart, he knew that the story of this woman and her family was about to change, not because she asked, but because someone finally saw. With one last look at the dim glow of the window, he gathered his courage. He took a deep breath, then slowly walked toward the door, each step louder in his ears than the one before. His hand rose, trembling slightly, and he knocked. Inside, the sound startled the family. The woman froze, her eyes darting toward the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly she rose and walked toward the door. The CEO waited, his heart beating faster than it ever had in any boardroom or speech. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say. He only knew that what he had just witnessed had already changed him. The knock on the door echoed softly in the small apartment. For a moment, everything inside went still. The children paused with food still in their hands, their eyes wide as they looked toward their mother. The old woman leaned forward, her brow furrowed with worry. Visitors at this hour rare, and the sound of an unexpected knock carried with it both fear and uncertainty. The woman slowly rose from her chair. She hesitated, wiping her hands on her worn apron, and glanced back at her family as if to reassure them. "Stay here," she whispered gently. Then she walked toward the door, each step slow and cautious. Her heart pounded. She wasn't expecting anyone. On the other side, the CEO stood quietly, his chest tight, his hand still hovering near the wooden frame. He had never been nervous before meetings with presidents or investors. Yet here, in front of this simple door, his palms were damp. When the door finally opened a crack, her tired face appeared in the narrow space. At first, her eyes widened in surprise. Then, recognition dawned. She remembered him from the diner. Her voice was uneasy, almost defensive. "You, what are you doing here?" He swallowed, unsure of how to begin. He hesitated, then spoke softly. "I saw you earlier, when you asked for the leftovers. I didn't mean to intrude. I needed to understand." Her grip on the door tightened, her body slightly angled as if to shield the inside of the house. Embarrassment and pride colored her expression. "There's nothing to understand," she replied quickly. "I only asked because it helps my family. That's all." The CEO lowered his voice even more, his tone sincere. "I saw them. Your children. And your mother, I think." Her eyes flickered with both shock and shame. For a moment, she wanted to shut the door and end the conversation. But something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't there out of pity. He looked troubled, almost broken by what he had seen. "I shouldn't have followed you," he admitted. "It wasn't fair. But when I saw how you divided the food, how you gave it all to them before yourself, I couldn't just walk away." Her lips trembled slightly, though she tried to steady her voice. "People don't need to know about our struggles. I work. I manage. I don't want anyone's pity." The children's laughter from behind her drifted toward the door, reminding both of them what was at stake. The CEO nodded slowly. "I understand. It's not pity that brings me here. It's respect." His words hung in the air, surprising her. She blinked, caught off guard. Respect was not something she often received. Most people barely noticed her. Most looked past her as if she were invisible. He continued, his voice firm but kind. "You've carried more weight than many people could. I saw the strength in how you put your family before yourself. That isn't weakness. That's power." Her eyes softened, though her shoulders still carried tension. "I do what any mother, any daughter would do. You wouldn't understand." "I do," he said quietly, his gaze distant for a moment. "I grew up with nights just like those. Empty plates. My mother giving up her meal so I could eat. I've hidden those memories for years. But tonight I remembered." Silence filled the space between them. The woman looked at him differently now. His suit and polished shoes no longer spoke only of wealth and success. She saw a man who, at some point, had known struggle too. "I don't ask for much," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Just enough to get by. I don't want handouts. I want to work. I want my children to have better than this." Her words pierced him. They weren't demands. They weren't pleas. They were the honest dreams of someone who had sacrificed everything for the ones she loved. For a long moment, the CEO didn't speak. He simply looked at her, feeling something shift inside him. All the numbers, contracts, and profits that usually filled his mind seemed meaningless compared to this truth standing in front of him. Finally, he said gently, "I don't see someone asking for handouts. I see someone holding her world together with almost nothing. And I can't ignore that." Her eyes glistened, but she quickly blinked the tears away, unwilling to show weakness. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. He breathed deeply, choosing his words with care. "Because I believe you deserve more than just scraps of food at the end of the day. You deserve a chance. Not pity, not charity. A real chance to live with dignity." The woman's hand trembled slightly on the edge of the door. No one had ever spoken to her like that. For years, her life had been about silence and survival. Now here was a stranger, a man of power, looking at her as if she was someone of worth. Behind her, the children peeked curiously through the gap, their wide eyes staring at the man outside. The CEO caught their gaze and gave them a small, gentle smile. Something in that moment told her she could trust him, even though every part of her heart had been trained to be cautious. She exhaled slowly, stepping back to allow the door to open wider. "Come inside," she said quietly. "But please, don't look at us with sorrow. This is our life, and we live it with pride." He nodded, moved by her words. As he stepped inside, he knew the conversation that would follow would not only change her life, but his as well. The room was small, but as the CEO stepped inside, it felt full of warmth. The walls were cracked, the furniture mismatched, and the air held the faint smell of old wood. Yet despite the poverty, there was a sense of dignity here. The children sat quietly, their curious eyes fixed on him, while the elderly woman offered a faint nod of greeting. The woman stood near the table, her posture tense. Unsure of what would happen next, he glanced around, his eyes taking in every detail: the worn-out shoes by the door, the schoolbook stacked neatly in a corner, the blanket patched and folded with care. Everything spoke of sacrifice, of someone trying to give more than she had. Breaking the silence, he said softly, "You've done something incredible here. I don't think you even realize it." The woman frowned slightly, not understanding. "I've only done what I had to. There's nothing special about it." He shook his head. "You think it's nothing, but I see it clearly. With so little, you've created love, hope, and dignity for your family. That's something no money can buy." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed, but also touched by his words. "I only want my children to grow up better than this," she whispered. "I don't want them to carry the same struggles I do." Her words pierced him deeply. He looked at the two children, their faces bright despite the hardship. They smiled shyly when he met their gaze, and he couldn't help but smile back. Then he turned to the woman, his voice steady. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I rarely share with anyone. I didn't grow up in wealth. People think I've always had everything. But the truth is, I was raised in a small home not so different from this one. My mother worked herself to the bone. Some nights she went to bed hungry so I could eat. I promised myself, when I grew up, I'd never forget what that felt like." The woman looked at him in surprise. She hadn't expected a man like him, dressed in fine clothes, to carry such a past. For the first time, she saw him not as a CEO, not as a stranger, but as someone who had once known hunger too. He took a deep breath and continued. "When I saw you tonight, when I saw how you gave up your share so they could eat, it brought me back to those nights. And it reminded me of a promise I made long ago." She swallowed hard, unsure of what he meant. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want your children to go through what I went through," he said firmly. "And because I can do something about it." Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them together. She wasn't used to offers of help, and she wasn't sure if she could accept it. She had lived her life by working hard, by never depending on anyone. "I don't want charity," she whispered. "I don't want someone to feel sorry for us." He shook his head quickly. "This isn't charity. This is opportunity. I believe in what I saw tonight, the strength, the sacrifice, the love. People like you deserve to be seen. You've held your family together with almost nothing. Imagine what you could do if you had more." Her eyes widened slightly. His words carried weight, not pity. There was sincerity in his tone, the kind that couldn't be faked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I want to offer you a position in my company. A real job with fair pay, security, and a chance to grow. And beyond that, I want to make sure your children have the education they deserve. They shouldn't have to carry this struggle into their future." The woman's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The children looked up at her with wide, hopeful eyes, sensing that something important was happening. The old woman placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, as if to say, "It's all right to accept." Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he replied softly. "Not for me, but for them. For the future you've been dreaming of." Her lips trembled as the tears finally fell. She nodded slowly, unable to hold back her emotion any longer. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll accept." Relief and warmth filled the room. The children rushed to her side, hugging her tightly, their faces glowing with excitement, though they didn't fully understand what it all meant. The old woman closed her eyes and whispered a quiet blessing, her wrinkled face breaking into a smile. The CEO felt something shift inside him too. He had closed many deals in his life, signed contracts worth fortunes, but none of them had ever left him feeling this way. This wasn't just business. This was humanity. This was changed. As he prepared to leave, the woman walked into the door. Her voice was still shaky, but her gratitude was clear. "You've given us more than help. You've given us hope. I'll never forget this." He smiled gently. "And I'll never forget you. You reminded me tonight of something more important than wealth, that the greatest riches in life are found in love, sacrifice, and dignity." When he stepped back into the quiet night, the air felt different. He looked up at the stars, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind him, the small home glowed with warmth, no longer just a place of survival, but now a place of new beginnings. The story of a woman who had asked only for extra food had become something far greater. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest requests can open the door to life-changing secrets.